Well, before I begin my real story, I'm going to set the scene and tell you where I was in my life. I had a baby Gayton. He's actually going to be 22 in a few days, so this is an old story. My takeaway from being a mom for the first time was that life was awesome. When Gayton was 2, I found out I had thyroid cancer, and I'm fine now, but my takeaway from that was like, how could I possibly get cancer in my 20s? When Gayton was 3 years old, we got pregnant with identical twin boys, Teo and Benoit, and we were astonished. But to make a long story short, there was a problem, and they were stillborn. I had to give birth to these babies and make arrangements for them to be buried. So my takeaway was that life was so hard sometimes, and I felt like all the color was draining from my emotions, and I was just left with black and white. When Gayton was about 4 and a half, we got pregnant again, and this is where my story begins. I didn't really want to think about being pregnant. I just wanted to race to the finish line and be done. And I felt like a bad mom for that. I really wanted to savor every part of the pregnancy. But I really wanted a no-drama pregnancy plan. So I did everything I could to make that happen. I did a lot of yoga, I did a lot of deep breathing, I did meditation, and I even borrowed my friends' cassette tapes about hypnobirthing. So I told you it was an old story. So I'd put the cassette tape in the evening and listen to the affirmations, and this overly calm voice would say things like, with each contraction, allow your body to open like the petals of a rose. So, it was a long 9 months for me. It was pretty solemn. But eventually, I went into labor. It was mild. It was about 2 in the morning, but the contractions were mild. They were regular, and my husband was ready to get to the hospital. We live about 4 minutes away from the hospital, and I wasn't ready to go at all. So he was antsy, so he called his brother to come pick up Gayton and take him away, and I just sat and did some deep breathing. Joel was really anxious, so he called our midwife and told her what was going on. And she said, relax, you have plenty of time. Give me a call in about an hour. Let me know how things are going. And I did some yoga. And I thought, I am doing yoga during my contractions. This fits my no-drama pregnancy plan perfectly. This is great. So Joel's still nervous. He calls the hospital, and he tells them we're a work in progress. He tells them about my contractions, and the nurse wanted to talk to me directly. So he puts me on the phone, have a little discussion with the nurse, and then I felt her voice change a little bit, and she said, you're not ready to come in. And then my voice changed a little bit, and I got a little defensive, and I'm like, I know, I didn't even want to call you. My husband wanted to call. He's like panicking. So we hung up. I hopped in a hot shower. I got out. I did my hair. And, I was standing in the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and it was the first time I looked at myself, and I thought, I look so beautiful. I didn't have that moment the whole pregnancy. And I thought, I'm going to look so good in the baby pictures. I can't stand it. I look so terrible in all the other birth pictures we had. So I'm standing there at the sink, and I all of a sudden had this massive, must have been like a piggyback cluster of contractions. I really thought I was being electrocuted. I was holding onto the sink so hard, I thought I might crush it with my bare hands. And that was a real thought. Like I was like holding it like this, couldn't talk, couldn't breathe, couldn't call for Joel. And all of a sudden, this voice came into my head. It said, with each contraction, allow your body to relax, open like the petals of a rose. And you know what? It totally worked. I was like, okay, sure. So I relaxed. The contractions ended, and it was like that. I let go of the sink, and I yelled, Joel, my water just broke. And he yelled, I'll get the car. And I yelled, oh, I feel the head. So I start walking down to my bedroom to have a proper birth on the bed. Well, when you're crowning, you can't walk very far. So I get to my son's room, which is a few steps away, and I stumble in, and I lay down on the purple rug. while my husband calls 911. Now, back in that day, there was no building for the 911 people to sleep in. So from what I'm told, they get a call, they come from home, they get the ambulance, then they come to your house. So any other first responders in the area that hear the message can come to the scene before the ambulance gets there. So there I am. I'm on the floor. I'm on my side. I'm getting ready to push. And I hear, "You need to breathe, ma'am. You need to breathe." And I look up, and there's a fully uniformed officer. It was Officer Wentworth. He showed up. And, my husband's on 911, and they tell him to go get towels. So he goes into our bathroom, and we have about a dozen maroon towels that are ready to go, and he grabs the 2 yellow ones that... Yeah. If you don't know why that's funny, yellow isn't a good color for what was about to happen. So, my poor husband, he's still talking to the dispatcher, and he's obviously getting confused. He's calling the dispatcher sweetheart by accident, and I'm I'm still very calm, but I started to pray for the rescue squad to get there, and I think that Joel and the officer were doing the same thing. So, next thing I know, I push out a 9-pound baby boy. Yes, thank you. Oh, you bet. And actually, my son, who was the 9-pounder, people just clapped for me. You were 9 pounds, my friend. So anyway, back to the story. He doesn't know that that's a big baby. So Sylvan James Kohler-Foisey lets out a wonderful, healthy cry just as the rescue squad gets to our house. So it's 2 young women, younger than me, and an older man. And the young women look over at my husband, and they say, "Oh, my God, Dr. Foisey!" Well, my husband is a math professor at SUNY Potsdam, and one of the women had just taken calculus with him, and the other one's boyfriend had taken a class with him, and the other one was signed up for a class in the fall. And I just lay there on the carpet. I closed my eyes, and I just was listening, and I'm listening, and they say, "Oh, he's so cute, he's so cute." And I thought, these are the people I've been praying for. Anyway, EMTs show up to scenes that are not like this. I mean, the baby was fine, I was fine. This was a celebration, and Joel was caught up in their joy, and he let them cut the umbilical cord, and they were thrilled. So it's time to go to the hospital, though we need to get out of here. So I get on a stretcher, and Joel is told to get a blanket for the baby. So he grabs the comforter from the bed and starts wrapping him up the baby. So he puts the big lump in his legs, and we get to the hospital. I'm greeted by the nurse who had talked to me earlier, and she apologized. She said that there was a full moon, there were lots of babies born, I sounded really calm, and she was stalling me. An orderly yells out, "Well, this is a scene you don't see very often, a dad coming through the ER doors with a baby between his legs." So we settle in, we're in the hospital, it's time for Gaten to come meet his brother. He says hello to the baby, and he kisses him on the head and says, "Hello, big brother." And we explain to him, we're like, "Hey, you're the big brother, this is the little brother." And he says, "I know, I don't want to hurt the baby's feelings by calling him little." So there's a nickname for a baby that's born after a stillbirth, and it's called a rainbow baby. And I think that's exactly what Syl did for me. He gave me the color back in my emotions. And this was supposed to be my no-drama pregnancy plan, but instead, I had a baby on the floor, had a close encounter with a cop, 3 EMTs, I was raced to the hospital in an ambulance, and that's, I'm so grateful for those strangers who spent that time with me. And I just wanted to share that story with you today. Thank you so much.